You're familiar with the proverb, good fences make good neighbors. Whoever coined that likely never dealt with an HOA. It all began with a sticky note, a single yellow square adhered neatly to my front door bearing the message, "Your lawn violates HOA standards. Please resolve immediately, Karen." I've heard of neighbors leaving notes about noise or parking, but lawn violations? My lawn was immaculate. I mow it every week. No weeds, edges trimmed. It looked so pristine that I joked about hosting barbecues just for people to admire it. Initially, I assumed this must be an error, a note intended for someone else. But no, my name was on it, and it was signed Karen. That's when I recalled. Karen is the president of our HOA. I'd met her once at a community meeting. Sharp, businesslike, and the type of person who remembers every bylaw, no matter how obscure. Back then, she seemed strict but harmless. I was mistaken. The second note arrived 2 days later. This time, it was attached to my mailbox. The mailbox wasn't the correct shade of black. According to the HOA guidelines, only shade number 217 is permitted. Please repaint immediately. Karen, I couldn't help but chuckle. Black is black, right? How could there possibly be an incorrect shade? Still, I chose to cooperate. I emailed the HOA seeking clarification, thinking maybe it was a simple misunderstanding. Instead of a clarification, I received a single-line reply. It's in the rulebook, section 4.2, please comply. Now I was intrigued. I retrieved the HOA handbook, a bulky stack of papers in a plastic binder, and located section 4.2. Sure enough, there it was. Mailboxes must be painted shade number 217 black. But here's the twist. The rule had been added last month. A few days passed and things seemed to calm down. I decided to repaint the mailbox just to avoid any issues. I even verified the exact shade at the hardware store. Shade number 217. A flat black so indistinguishable from regular black it seemed like a ripoff. I repainted it and thought that would settle it. It didn't. The third note was the breaking point. I discovered it taped to my front door, written in what appeared to be red marker. Your grass is 0.75 inches too tall. This is your final warning. Non-compliance will result in action. It was signed again, Karen. Final warning. Action. I checked the date, half expecting to find April 1st, but no, this was genuine. At this stage, I was more amused than anything. I snapped a picture of the note, shared it in a neighborhood group chat, and captioned it, "Apparently I'm running a jungle here, folks. Who knew?" To my astonishment, several neighbors messaged me privately, advising me not to provoke her. They all echoed the same sentiment. Karen wasn't someone you wanted to challenge. She was formidable, one neighbor mentioned. She had once forced me to repaint my shed because the shade was off. Another neighbor admitted she fined her for having too many trash bags outside on pickup day. Before we continue with the story, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's my dream to once reach 1,000 subscribers. Hope you can help me reach this dream. Now back to the story. That weekend, as I was mowing my overly tall grass, I noticed something strange. Karen, clipboard in hand, standing on the sidewalk observing me. She wasn't trying to conceal it. She just stood there, arms crossed, scribbling rapidly. I turned off the mower and waved. Something wrong? She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Just making sure the rules are followed. Her tone was sweet but condescending, as if I were a child needing supervision. I nodded and resumed mowing, but I felt her gaze on me the entire time. That night, I decided to install security cameras. Not because I thought I needed them, but because something about Karen's behavior raised red flags. Who monitors their neighbors in broad daylight? It felt intrusive. The cameras paid off sooner than expected. 2 nights later, I received an alert on my phone. Motion detected in the backyard. It was 2 a.m., so I reviewed the footage, expecting perhaps a stray cat. Instead, I saw Karen. She was standing just outside my fence, shining a flashlight through the slats. For a moment, I thought my eyes were deceiving me, but no, it was her. Clipboard in one hand, flashlight in the other. She was attempting to measure my grass. I watched the screen, my heartbeat accelerating. This wasn't standard HOA business. This was stalking. The next morning, I confronted Karen directly. I walked to her house and knocked on the door, camera footage in hand. When she opened it, her expression remained unchanged. If anything, she looked smug. "Good morning, Michael," she said, as if we were old acquaintances. "What were you doing in my backyard last night?" I asked, getting straight to the point. Her smile didn't falter. "I was ensuring compliance." "Compliance? At 2 a.m.? She shrugged. "Sometimes the job requires late hours." I handed her the printout of the footage. "If I catch you on my property again, I'll be filing a police report." For a moment, her composure broke. Her eyes narrowed and her tone became icy. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Michael. Just follow the rules, and we won't have a problem. Asterisk, asterisk, update. Asterisk, asterisk. After my confrontation with Karen over her 2 a.m. lawn inspection, still surreal to say out loud, I decided it was time to start documenting everything. The first couple of nights after setting up the cameras, nothing happened. No strange alerts, no unexpected visitors. It almost seemed like I had imagined the entire ordeal. Maybe Karen had chosen to back off after our little showdown. Then came the third night. I was reviewing the day's footage, not because I expected anything, but to ensure the cameras were functioning properly. For hours, it was just routine activity. Birds, cars passing by, me taking out the trash. But then, just after midnight, there she was, Karen. She was standing at the edge of my property, clipboard in hand, staring at my house. She wasn't moving, just standing there like a character from a horror movie. Initially, I thought maybe she was out for a late-night walk and had paused to check something. But the longer I watched, the weirder it became. She wasn't looking at my lawn. She was gazing at my windows. I rewound the footage to ensure I wasn't misinterpreting it. Nope, she was definitely staring directly at my windows, occasionally jotting something down on her clipboard. After about 5 minutes, she finally moved. But instead of leaving, she walked along the side of my property, stopping to shine a flashlight through the gaps in my fence. What was she searching for? I felt a strange mix of anger and unease. On one hand, this was blatant harassment. On the other, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening. This wasn't typical HOA behavior, not even for someone as controlling as Karen. The next day, I decided to take a more proactive stance. I downloaded the footage onto a flash drive and emailed the HOA board with the subject line, "Ongoing harassment by HOA president." I kept the message polite but firm. I detailed the situation, attached the video, and requested an official explanation for why Karen was trespassing on my property. I didn't expect much, but I thought it was worth a try. 2 hours later, I received a reply. "Thank you for your email. We'll discuss this at the next board meeting." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of the footage, just a vague promise to discuss it. I couldn't determine if they were ignoring me intentionally or were genuinely afraid of Karen. Either way, it was clear I'd have to manage this on my own. The real escalation occurred a few days later. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in the backyard trimming some overgrown bushes when I heard a disturbance near the front of the house. At first, I thought it was just some kids playing, but when I went to check, I saw Karen arguing with one of my neighbors, Susan. Susan, bless her, is one of the few people in the neighborhood who hasn't fallen for Karen's power trips. She's in her late 60s but doesn't take crap from anyone, and it was evident from her tone that she was fed up. "You can't just show up uninvited and start snooping around," Susan was saying, her arms crossed like a teacher reprimanding a misbehaving student. Karen, ever the embodiment of self-righteousness, responded with, "I have every right to ensure compliance with the HOA's rules." Susan wasn't convinced. At 7 in the morning? With a tape measure? I hadn't even noticed the tape measure in Karen's hand until Susan pointed it out. That's when I realized she'd been measuring driveways, not just mine, everyone's. After that incident, I decided to anticipate whatever game Karen was playing. I printed out screenshots of the footage, added timestamps, and began asking other neighbors if they'd noticed anything unusual. Initially, most were reluctant to speak. Karen clearly had them under her control, and I got the distinct feeling that many were afraid of retaliation. But then Susan spoke up. "She's been harassing people for years," she said, "finding them for imaginary violations, showing up at odd hours, even digging through people's trash." I must have looked skeptical because she quickly added, "I'm not making this up. She fined me $50 last year because I didn't bring my bins in quickly enough." Around midnight, I received another motion alert from the backyard camera. This time, when I accessed the live feed, I caught Karen in the act. She was fiddling with my back gate, trying to open it. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside, turning on the porch light. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She froze, the beam of her flashlight swinging erratically as she attempted to formulate an excuse. "Just checking for compliance," she said, her voice strained but calm. "Compliance with what?" I asked, my patience finally snapping. "It's the middle of the night, and you're trespassing on my property." Her composure faltered. "If you followed the rules, I wouldn't have to resort to this," she yelled. "You're the one making this difficult, Michael." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She genuinely thought she was the victim in this situation. I took a step forward, my phone raised to show her I was recording. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police." For a moment, it seemed she might try to argue, but then she turned and walked away, muttering something under her breath. That night, I filed a formal police report. Enough was enough. *** final update. I began the day by emailing the footage to the local police department, along with the formal report I'd filed. My tone was polite but firm. I explained that this wasn't just about an HOA dispute. This was a pattern of harassment, trespassing, and intimidation. I made it clear that I was concerned for my safety, which wasn't even an exaggeration at that point. Within a few hours, I received a call from a local officer. "He's saying your HOA president is trying to measure your grass in the middle of the night?" "Yes," I replied, trying not to laugh at how absurd it sounded aloud. And break into your backyard?" The officer asked a few more questions, mostly about whether I'd had any previous conflicts with Karen, mentioning the sticky notes and constant nitpicking, and whether I had footage to support my claims. When I told him I had multiple videos, he immediately became more interested. "If you can bring that down to the station, we can take a closer look." Later that day, I met with the officer in person. I handed over the footage on a flash drive and walked him through each clip. Karen lurking near my windows, shining her flashlight into my backyard. And of course, the grand finale. Her attempting to open my back gate. As the officer watched, his expression shifted from polite skepticism to something much more serious. "This is not normal behavior," he said. "No kidding," I replied. He explained that while HOA disputes are common, they rarely escalate to this level. Usually it's about parking violations or overgrown bushes, but this, trespassing, attempted property damage, it's a whole different ballgame. Hearing someone in authority validate my concerns was both reassuring and a bit unsettling. Up until that point, I'd been so focused on protecting myself that I hadn't fully grasped just how unhinged Karen's behavior truly was. The next day, things took an unexpected turn. I woke up to find another note taped to my door, but this one wasn't from Karen. It was from Susan, my neighbor, an unofficial ally in this entire ordeal. "Michael," it read, "I think you should know that Karen has been going door to door talking about you. She's saying some pretty nasty things. Let me know if you want to talk." I called Susan immediately. "She's telling people you're harassing her," Susan said, her voice tinged with both anger and disbelief. "That you've been stalking her and refusing to follow HOA rules. She even told me you threatened her with violence." I almost dropped the phone. "What? She's the one trespassing on my property." "I know," Susan said, "but not everyone does, and some people are starting to believe her." That's when I realized I needed to go on the offensive. If Karen was going to spread lies, I had to take control of the narrative. I spent the rest of the afternoon compiling everything. Videos, emails, even screenshots of the notes Karen had left me. and posted it all in the neighborhood group chat with a brief explanation. "Hi everyone, I wanted to address some rumors going around. Karen has been claiming that I'm harassing her, but the truth is, she's been trespassing on my property and attempting to enforce made-up HOA rules. Here's the proof." But the real surprise came when a neighbor named Margaret spoke up. "Karen's been like this for years," she wrote. "She once tried to fine me for parking my car too close to the curb. When I refused to pay, she threatened to take me to small claims court. By the time the police showed up at Karen's house that evening, half the neighborhood was watching from their front lawns. I hadn't intended for it to become a spectacle, but word travels fast in small communities, and people were curious to see how it would unfold. I stayed on my porch, watching as 2 officers knocked on Karen's door. She opened it with her usual air of self-importance, but the moment they mentioned the words trespassing and investigation, her demeanor changed. "I was just doing my job as HOA president," she said loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "This is a misunderstanding." The officers weren't having it. They explained that they had reviewed the footage and that her actions constituted harassment and trespassing. Karen's face turned pale. "This is outrageous," she yelled. "I'll have you know I'm on the board of—" "Ma'am," one of the officers interrupted, "please come with us." As they led her to the squad car, she started screaming, "This is a violation of my rights. He's the one breaking the rules." The aftermath was almost as satisfying as seeing Karen get arrested. With her gone, the HOA held an emergency meeting to address the situation. Susan and a few other neighbors nominated me to attend as a witness, which felt surreal, but also somewhat amusing. During the meeting, I presented all the evidence again and made it clear that I wasn't trying to destroy the HOA, just hold Karen accountable for her actions. To my surprise, several board members actually apologized for not stepping in sooner. Karen was officially removed from her position, and the board voted to review and revise some of the more ridiculous rules she'd enforced over the years. It's been a few weeks since all this happened, and things have finally started to feel normal again. My cameras are still up, just in case, but I haven't seen or heard from Karen since her arrest. Word on the street is she's staying with a relative in another town,